Namaste and Jai Hind, everyone. Namaste, sir. Thank you for your time. Let's dive straight into it. Every minute with Rajesh K. Singh ji is going to be important for us. And so let's start with Operation Sindoor, sir. We've got to start there and then we'll move forward. Sure. My first question to you, sir, and it's a little off the script. What happened on the 9th, sir? The 7th response, when was that decided? And then what happened on the 9th? Take us through that time.
Well, let me put it this way. After Pahalgam, there was a meticulous planning of what targets we should hit. The intent this time was to go beyond the foot soldiers and hit the headquarters, particularly of these two outfits, the LET and the Jaish-e-Mohammed, at Muridke and Bahawalpur respectively. These outfits' relationship with terror in India goes back to 26/11. They were also involved in the Parliament attack, and the idea was to send a clear message. And we felt that the message would only go if we hit the headquarters and not just, some of the camps. The planning, therefore, was focused on that. The intent was to hit only the terrorist outfits. 9 targets were hit, including these 2 main ones. Again, the intent was to convey to the Pakistanis that this is a non-escalatory, calibrated operation hitting only terrorists, and there was no intent ever to hit their military infrastructure or their civilian assets of any kind. That was conveyed or sought to be conveyed to them the next day. They did not respond to our calls at the DGMO level and decided to escalate. That escalation, as far as the escalation part is concerned, the services in an integrated manner under the CDS had drawn up a calibrated response of an escalation ladder at how they respond and where we go from there, idea being to maintain your escalation dominance. That process thereafter started. They responded. Our air defenses held very well. But because they kept escalating, we therefore thereafter used some of our more potent weapons to hit their airfields. Thereafter, essentially, they came forward on the 9th, basically asking for a call with the DGMO, which they had earlier kind of refused even to take. And it was clear at that stage that they were in the process of capitulating, essentially. And this was in the morning of the 9th. So even before the announcement was made, we all knew that this was going to happen. This is what happened. The DGMO spoke and they essentially asked for a ceasefire. They said a few other things which I won't go into, but broadly that was the sequence of events.
But, sir, why Bahawalpur and Muridke? Because the report suggested that they had actually emptied out that place. Both these places were empty. So there was no cadre there to be hit. But why hit them? Why hit these markazes?
I think the hits at these 9 locations killed, according to our assessment, almost 100 terrorists and their followers. Whether some of the key people left is a different matter, but aside from the damage to the terrorists, who are also, in a way, the way Pakistan has shown that they are their assets as well, besides hitting them in terms of casualties, the intent was to demolish their headquarters. It was to send a message to these 2 outfits, who, as I said, have a long lineage in terms of terror activities in India.
You must have seen the pictures of the Fauj and the military also standing and the prayers being led by a known terrorist, a flag terrorist, that entire funeral which happened. What's your impression when you saw that? How would you read those pictures?
So as I said just now, Anant, obviously these guys are their assets. They treat them as their assets and they mourn for them when they are hit. So it confirms and validates our assessment all along that these people are deliberately cultivated for cross-border terrorism in India as an instrument of trade policy. The difference is that under Prime Minister Modi, we've now decided that we will no longer allow them to necessarily only choose time and place. Yes, they will have the element of surprise always in terms of, hitting out, finding some innocent target, soft targets, hit them. The intent is to, thereafter, they should know, one, that we will respond, but two, they should not know how we'll respond, the time and the place. And the nuclear umbrella is not going to deter us. There will be a policy of zero tolerance. The hits will be on the headquarters and on the leaders, not only on the foot soldiers. This is the new normal that I think Prime Minister Modi has made it very, very clear. And in future, therefore, the element of surprise will not be only with them, it will be with us also. We will sort of decide the script of what ensues thereafter once they try to, hit some soft targets in India. That expectation that the policy of forbearance that was practiced for decades, the new normal is that the forbearance is over. We will hit them hard at a time and place of our own choosing. And the level of escalation will be determined by our leadership. And it will definitely not be turning the other cheek.
What kind of response was enacted by the Pakistanis? Dushman se kya hai? What came? Because there were missiles that landed in Sirsa and some P-15s were noted. Was Delhi ever the target? What was their response? How would you read that response?
Yeah, so they used a mix of drones and loitering munitions and some missiles. Initial part on the first day when they used a lot of drones which seemed to be not to be armed, which perhaps they were looking to, do only surveillance, assess our air defenses. Over time, later in the night, there were some actual armed drones and explosive kamikaze drones, explosive dropping drones being used, and that caused a limited amount of damage in India. For the most part, our air defenses held very well because of its multi-layered nature, from the S-400s down to the Akash and to the Vishorads and the short-range missiles. So that multi-layered, overlapping air defense structure with many redundancies built into it held very well, I would say, and our population centers obviously were not affected at all. In Pakistan, the propaganda on that day, incidentally, was that the whole of northern India is in turmoil, and a lot of missiles have gone. So it was very funny to me because obviously we were going about our normal business and there was no sense of panic anywhere. But yeah, that was it. Our air defenses held very well, and they held because there was a fusion of both indigenous technology and and some strong assets and weapons that we had taken from foreign sources as well.
So did they fire ballistic missiles, and was Delhi the target, sir? Was Delhi ever on their mark?
I'm not very sure about that. They did fire at least one, but that was taken down near Sirsa, and thereafter, I don't think they probably were. They may have fired other ballistic missiles, but I don't see any reason or have not seen anything to believe that Delhi necessarily was being targeted.
What was the thought behind Bharat's response? After the 8th, if I could ask you, on the intervening night of 8th and 9th, why were 11 air bases targeted? And that was a steep climb up the escalation ladder. So what brought that about?
That brought it about because, as I mentioned, that it had been made clear to them that we are not hitting your military targets or anything else. Our action was confined, calibrated, and limited to the terrorist headquarters and terrorist infrastructure alone. Despite that, they decided to act as if these people were their own assets. They escalated using initially different types of drones and gradually built it up to armed drones and explosives dropping drones. Thereafter, in that night, it was decided that we need to go up to the next step. That step was targeting their airfields, as Air Marshal Dixit just mentioned. And I think that the fact that our long-range weapons, the BrahMos in particular, got through, hit some of their most strategic air bases very, very effectively, that probably brought it home to them that this is going south for them, and they decided to essentially capitulate and seek a ceasefire.
But it was not 1 or 2 airfields. Sudhir ji is also here. We're talking about BrahMos, but 11 airfields.
Yeah.
That's a steep, calibration in terms of escalation and saying really getting into their skin or under their skin. What was the thought process behind that? There could have been a response of decimating 2 or 3 airfields, but 11 at the same time.
I think the intent was to go all out once they, kept escalating, despite our warning that we are being calibrated, strategic, confining ourselves. The intent was on that night to go a little all out and make it clear to them that, you will suffer much greater consequences if you sort of keep moving up the escalation ladder from your side. Our escalation ladder had certain responses built in. This was the next step.
The Nur Khan strike, was there a specific reason why Nur Khan? Because that sent the general into the bunker. He's now field marshal, but he was hiding in a bunker. Yeah. I
think targeting is not something that I would necessarily be involved in, so I wouldn't be able to mention that in great detail. Maybe Air Marshal Dikshit would have been the better person to respond on that. But it is one of their most important bases. I understand their VIP squadron is based there, and there are other strategic assets there. The hit there probably made it very clear to them that there was no way they could sustain this kind of a conflict, particularly given the effectiveness of our long-range missiles.
As per you, the Pakistanis have made a lot of claims. They claimed that they have downed 5 of our aircraft. They've really, really decimated a lot of our military infrastructure. Is there any credence to that?
Obviously, there isn't. I mean, their claims about destroying an S-400, all that has been proven incorrect with visual evidence for all to see. I would say I'm not going to get into details of how many assets they lost or we lost, but I would say that in terms of the combination of military casualties and military assets, their losses are manifold compared to our losses. Manifold, I mean several times more. If you add to them the terrorists, over 100 killed, who are also, as I said, their assets, the number obviously is several times whatever minor losses we suffered.
So there is an estimate and some claims that nearly 20% of Pakistan's military infrastructure has been decimated. And it's a severe lesson in terms of nuclear deterrence also, that ball or that bogey that they've been flouting. Yeah. Your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think there is it's clear that conventional deterrence can be practiced even in the context of two nuclear powers. There is always a little bit of uncertainty about something unthinkable happening, but I think it's been established that you can practice some level of conventional deterrence even under a nuclear umbrella, and people's bluff can be called when it comes to some of these, the saber rattling that they used to do earlier.
The truce, the ceasefire, or the pause, the call from the Pakistanis. Donald Trump made a lot of claims, talked about a trade deal, intervention. There's talk that some of the Middle Eastern nations were also talking. Your thoughts? Was there pressure?
I mean, this is something that perhaps the MEA would be in a better position to answer, but I do want to emphasize what has always been said, that this was a bilateral sort of agreement. If you see the sequence, I mentioned the fact that this came about, request for a talk came in the morning. We knew at that stage already that they were about to capitulate. So, yeah, I mean, from that sequence, it should be very clear that it is bilateral. The fact that a lot of friends and well-wishers would also be talking to both sides is not a secret. I mean, that would have also been happening.
The Pakistanis, have they learned the lesson, or are they going to recalibrate and again try something in the near future? Your assessment?
I mean, their intent, we can only assess their actions. So we'll wait and see. I mean, I think deterrence works with them for a certain amount of time. Thereafter, they often go for a further provocation. I wouldn't rule out anything. End of the day, it's a state where the old cliche goes that it's an army with a state. And it's true, they've captured the state apparatus. They've captured the state's resources as well. They are, as I mentioned in another interview, this gentleman, the field marshal, sits on an investment facilitation cell there, deciding where resources should go and what should be done. I mean, he's essentially deciding economic and financial public policy as well. So yeah, it's a very different kind of a state, and obviously they are therefore able to divert resources from their economy, which has gone through, I think, if my memory is correct, they've gone through 24 IMF bailout packages. Their GDP is about 1/10 of ours. And right now, the last I saw the data, 2 of our Indian states, Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra, have higher state domestic products than Pakistan. 3 others, Karnataka, UP, and 1 other state, Karnataka, UP, and Gujarat, I think. 3 others are going to sort of get ahead of Pakistan in GDP terms by the end of this year. So obviously, the ability of this army to garner resources, divert it for the military, while keeping its population without social and economic security, that is the real challenge there. And it's important to expose this, because that is why they've, as a country, they've even gone behind Bangladesh when it comes to per capita GDP and in terms of economic and social indicators.
Taking the conversation forward, what, according to you, are the 3 or 4 big learnings from this 90-hour conflict? And was there a moment where we also had to recalibrate as a nation in our response? Did we underestimate, overestimate somewhere?
Yeah, so in terms of lessons, obviously it's very clear the primacy of air power and the need to increasingly the recourse to long-range weapons, weapons that are to be fired from a standoff distance, away from increasing use of unmanned systems. Those lessons have already come out from the Middle East and the Ukraine conflicts. It was brought home to us more clearly during this conflict. There was quite a lot of use of drones and loitering munitions, kamikaze drones on both sides. And the lessons that we've learned is that we need to double down on our indigenization efforts to ensure that we build a large, effective military drone manufacturing ecosystem. Right now, most of our drone manufacturing is in the civilian space. We need to harden those drones, enable them to work in environments where electronic warfare or GPS denial exists, and that hardening and work will have to be done. Industry understands. That is also why we enabled our defense forces right after Operation Sindoor with emergency powers. Up to 15% of their capital budget they can directly take from any source, including global sources. The intent is to quickly replenish whatever gaps were noticed during this period. Also, give visibility to the industry in terms of orders. And as a result, you will find that many drone companies are now getting into this military drone space, including those who are doing design and development themselves, one of whom has just managed to get a fairly large funding, I assume as part of the overall visibility that people have, that a lot of military orders will come, but also other large defense companies who've tied up with, in terms of technology, with European and American firms. So this military drone ecosystem was a little small in this country. There is a recognition that it needs to be built up, and we will support it. End of the day, we can only support it through orders, and that those orders will, as I said, in a address to the CIA earlier, there will be no shortage of orders as long as you meet our services requirements.
How big is this gap, sir, in terms of meeting the services requirement and also the local indigenous production of military equipment? How big is this gap?
Yeah. So I would say that there are certain areas where we've achieved some level of independence when it comes to artillery, when it comes to long-range missiles, when it comes to different types of armored land systems. All of these, maybe a lot of small arms also. I think we've reached a stage where DRDO design hived off to both public and private sector. They are getting most of the orders now. I'm talking about orders like the ATACS, which was ordered earlier, and a fairly large order for close quarter carbine, a 4.5 lakh this unit order has also been finalized. That will again be Indian design and Indian manufacturing. Ships, already we are self-sufficient. We are building 60 ships. Out of that, those 59 are being built in Indian shipyards. A few of them with foreign designs, but most with Indian designs. So we've made progress in these areas that I mentioned. There are other areas where the technology from the DRDO may not quite be there. And those are the areas where we'll have to adopt technology from other sources, do technology transfers, localize, but ultimately build in India. I mean, the intent is that this is a market which is a single buyer market. On the demand side, Government of India will ensure that, as we've already announced, our budget, 75% of our budget will be spent within the country, only 25% outside. That, combined with further improvements in our licensing regime on the supply side to improve ease of doing business so that manufacturing capacity, surge capacity expands in this country. Those two, we will operate on those two areas to ensure that we gradually build up a much larger, more diversified industrial base in this country, comprising of strong public and strong private sector companies.
Should we say that there is increased defense expenditure in terms of budgetary allocation? Because as of now, it's just around 2.2% of the GDP, and also our defense expenditure is less than the imports from China. So that's the number. Large amount of the defense expenditure is not towards procurement. So is there a thought process there?
Yes. So right now we are at actually 1.9% of GDP, and out of that about 27% actually goes into modernization budget, which is the capital equipment budget, which actually meets your capability gaps. The challenge has been, frankly, that our ability to spend that money, the absorptive capacity within industry, both global and within the country, has been low. There are two aspects to it. One is that we've not been placing enough orders, not signing enough contracts quickly enough. We've been too slow in procurement. It's an old story, which we are now trying to sort of really change. The other is that there are supply chain bottlenecks, as a result of which, within your country, HAL suffers because engines are not coming, or there are geopolitical conflicts which lead to delays in delivery from some of our strategic allies like Russia and Israel, both of whom happen to be going through a conflict period. So the only way to sort of meet that is to ensure that give complete visibility to industry in terms of orders, sign maximum contracts, ensure better management of those contracts, and based on that you can then try to sort of ensure that the pipeline of what is required by the armed forces becomes stronger. Those steps are now being taken. I've mentioned it before that last year we signed contracts of 2 lakh crores. That was twice the highest we've ever signed in our history. This year we will sustain that speed, and therefore, as I promised to the CII Business Council, we will give enough orders to industry. The industry has to come forward to meet our needs by investing in R&D one and in capital equipment on the other. Meaning that if an industrial house doesn't have an engineering department and doesn't have capital equipment and is essentially trying to do assembly with, just pure assembly with screwdriver technology type of thing, this is not what we have in mind. We want integrated, deep localization within the country. And my assessment is that is already happening. We have 16,000 MSMEs in this country now who are working as vendors and sub-vendors to our major OEM manufacturers, including the 16 PSUs and the 400-odd licensed manufacturers, some of which are fairly large. So yes, that the industry is at a very important tipping point in terms of really becoming a large, having a large share in our overall manufacturing ecosystem. And the government intends to, as I said, support it both on the demand side through order visibility and on the supply side through improving ease of doing business, easing licensing requirements, perhaps even providing deemed licensing beyond a certain time limit, to ensure that it becomes easier to do business in India if you're an arms manufacturer.
So my final question, because it's the last minute, we are surrounded, or Bharat as a challenge is undefined borders, exposed because of the sea. There is the Islamist threat, there is the expansionist threat, there is the secessionist threat, multiple. When are we going to have an integrated defense system that protects us from all sides? How far are we from achieving that?
I think, you've pointed out the challenges, but one should also look at our strengths. We do have a very large, very strong, very capable armed forces. We have, as a country, we have tremendous resilience and strength in our democratic structure, in our talented population. These challenges are there because of our nature of our geography, where we seem to be surrounded by one or two adversaries. But because of the strength inherent in this country and its growing economic strength in terms of the world's fourth largest economy, moving on to become the third largest very soon. You mentioned that we are doing only 2% of our GDP, but 2% of $4 trillion is not a small sum. It is much more than, say, 2.5% about 20 years back of a 1 trillion economy. So we've been expanding, but as I said, these challenges that you mentioned, we will meet by ensuring that the capability gaps that we identify get filled quickly by much faster, more agile policies, particularly on the procurement side. And that you will see the results of that during the course of this year. We are working on really revamping our entire procurement cycle, rewriting the DAP 2020, and end of the day, ensuring a level playing field where the private sector and the public sector come together to meet our defense needs for our services.
Any timeline for this, or do you see a goal where we'll be truly Atmanirbhar, not dependent on foreign technology, foreign equipment, machinery, for our own security needs, defense needs?
So I mentioned that there are some segments where we are already Atmanirbhar. There are others where we have to focus on, and in the air domain there are critical gaps, particularly in engine technologies, for which we probably will have to think about a national mission. That's a fairly yawning gap which we need to fill. There are others which we can fill by recourse to a combination of our own designs and manufacturing, the way we are doing AMCA on our own, a fifth-generation aircraft to be designed and built in India, hopefully with a combination of public and private sector talent. In the short run, you will have to rely on technology transfers. Main point I would like to make clear is that India has decided that we'll spend our money within this country. So whether it is Indian design and Indian manufacture, or whether it is technology transfer and thereafter Indian manufacturer, the bulk of any platform that we take, any large acquisition that we do, will have to be made within the country. That much is very clear, and therefore industry can rest assured that if you are in this business and if you are willing to put in your heart and soul into a combination of both R&D and sufficient focus on, capital equipment to meet the requirements of that industry, there will be no shortage of orders.
So defense is good business. Make in India and indigenous tech, indigenous equipment, that's the direction that we're taking. To all our viewers here at the CNN News 18 Town Hall Defense Edition, Rajesh K. Singh. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.